Angolan President Joao Lourenco has secured a second term in office after his MPLA party was declared the winner of the country's election.
According to election officials, the country's governing party, MPLA, scooped 51.17% of the vote, while the main opposition group, the National Union for the Total Independence of Angola, Unita, got 43.95%, its ever-best result. Meanwhile, Unita leader Adalberto Costa Jr. has rejected the result, citing discrepancies. Analysts fear any dispute could ignite mass street protests and possible violence. Unita and MPLA have been rivals since Angola gained independence from Portugal in 1975. The two sides fought a civil war intermittently for 25 years, in which hundreds of thousands of people were killed.
Well, for a little bit more on the Angolan election results, we're now joined via Zoom by African Affairs analyst and researcher at the Thabo Mbeki African School of Public and International Affairs at Unisa, Advocate Sipho Mantula. Thanks so much indeed for joining us. Welcome to the program.
Jambo Africa, Brother Peter, and good evening to the viewers of the globe.
All right, so a very tight race in the end, and I suppose what that means for the ruling MPLA is that times are a-changing.
No, definitely, Brother Peter. Even if we look at the numbers, remember that we are talking of a 33 million population of only 14 million eligible voters, and looking at Rwanda, where they have lost ground. Because if one looks at this outcome, you have a very tight numbers that have come out, looking at 51 to 43%. To the ruling party and to the opposition. So one will say that there are changing times, but it was difficult as one looks at how those elections took place. During COVID-19 last year, there was not enough campaign for both parties. Looking at the same time, the passing of the former president and those results just coming out today after the burial of the longest-serving president, Josiah Eduardo Wagado Santos. But again, Peter, I think that shows the maturity of even democracy in the SADC region. But at the same time, the issue that came out from opposition of saying that they are rejecting this outcome shows us that we are already in the stage that I will normally say is the stage of electoral dispute resolution that we must engage, rather than already sending celebratory messages coming from other leaders, because it now becomes a trend that African leaders, once there is a election results being announced, we are quick to go to sending messages rather than waiting for the clear, what I will call a clearance, or what it is a final approval by the courts in that country.
I mean, I guess the challenge that they have now is there were a lot of things that changed this time around. It used to be that counting happened in the field and the numbers were sent to a central location. All of a sudden it was switched, everything was counted in Luanda, which I guess for some people sort of says there's a wall of transparency that disappears by doing that. And the population being so big in Luanda and everyone convinced that they won the election, I suppose this can raise questions and attention that could lead to some unrest.
You know, Brother Peter, was looking at the 2 decades of what they've went through. If our viewers can recall, Angola had their last bite of the conflict in 2002, the last peace process that came through in 2002. South Africa played a critical role. But when you look at the numbers again and the rejection that comes out from opposition on those numbers, one will look at the issue of the deep state of electoral democracy in Africa. The deep state of elections in Angola again sits around the legitimacy, transparency of the electoral management body. And that's what we are finding, as I know you'll be moving to Kenya, that the issues around the EMBs, electoral management bodies, becomes at the center when there is a dispute to say that are these elections really credible? Were they the popular outcome of the electorate? And that's where, as you are saying, that there was a change this year of having the NEP center in Luanda. But if one looks at the numbers and at how young people, like I said earlier, the young people opted not to vote for the governing party. And that shows already that there is a deficit of confidence in the ruling party. And at the same time, the fear of this conflict that might erupt will be based on the allegations of either corruption coming from electoral management body, because the opposition leader, Alberto, is raising irregularities in counting. And once you have a challenge in counting, you can only prove it in the courts of law to say, how did they come to 51%? And as I was saying, it was very close, even if it is 43%, but it was a close, tight, neck-to-neck outcome. And that's why, Peter, I was even concerned when they were saying that we need an international review panel. One asked why Angola doesn't have its own electoral dispute resolution system or the mechanism, and those becomes the courts. Like South Africa, we've got electoral court. So when you have disputes, and more so at the presidential level, you need to tighten your electoral justice system by setting up electoral court, just like Kenya did, because Kenya struggled as well to have what we call electoral justice system. And now, if the opposition is now lamenting and claiming that they should be having an international review panel, that will already show that Portugal and other European countries might have an interest.
Let's talk a little bit about the UNITA, because MPLA, their message is loud and clear. Their popularity is diminishing over time. But sometimes when people go to vote, they're not necessarily voting for the other party, but voting against the one that's in power. Where does UNITA stand?
You know, UNITA, if one stands, when I look at their manifestos, they were already talking about the challenges of youth unemployment, corruption. But when you look at UNITA again, you know that very well that Lourenco was a former defense minister. And the issues of the natural resources of Angola have been exploited. They've been looted by allegedly the family, because one doesn't have to already citing that the family has looted until it is proven beyond reasonable doubt. But the issues of corruption as well, Brother Peter, UNITA was raising that the issue of the inner circle in MPLA has looted a lot. And even the issues of oil concessions that they've been lamenting on, that it seems Angola has not benefited. And having been there before, Brother Peter, in Rwanda, I've seen poverty levels in that country, and I've seen extreme greediness coming from the ruling elite in that country, as well as the Portugal interest in their former colony, because one will have to understand that UNITA also looked at the relation between Portugal and Angola. And like I said, even the family of the former late president, Isabella Bocado Santos, how he has amassed and looted a lot of resources of that country. So one would look at that, those were your election push and pull factors that UNITA has to raise against the governing party. And at the quick level, Lourenco might have to claim that he has been trying to fight corruption in that country. But if one looks, it was in the same party.
So what next for Angola? Is this a new era that's dawning?
One will say so, it is a new era, but at the same time, let's wait and see what will happen in terms of the electoral dispute resolution stage. And at the same time, will the elected president look at reaching out to UNITA in terms of engagement? As we have said, that we are worried that you might be having pockets of conflicts emanating from that region. But at the same time, the SADC region has to be on standby and to strengthen what I've said earlier, Brother Peter, our electoral justice system to assist countries like Angola when there are some electoral disputes. We know Zimbabwe is coming 2024. Many countries are coming for elections in 2023, 2024. So the SADC region need to tighten its electoral justice system. And at the same time, the issue around the independence of the Electoral Commission, that is at the core of our electoral democracy in the region. And that way forward, it will be for that outcome that we can hear from the courts. What will the courts say? Should UNITA pursue this electoral dispute through the courts? Or at the same time, as they have said, maybe we might need a regional or a continental review panel. I don't think the international review panel will be proper, rather than thinking of the regional and the continental body that can deal with presidential disputes in the African continent. We know many cases from Kenya, from Abuja, presidential disputes on elections. They normally lead to a civil war, normally leads to civil conflicts that emanate among political parties. So the way forward, Brother Peter, like I said, electoral democracy must rise in the Angolan state, but at the same time, acceptance of the result is key.
Advocate Sipho Mantula, always great getting your insights. Thank you so much indeed for joining us. These are interesting times. Let's see what happens in the coming days. We've got court cases probably in Angola, in Kenya at the same time. Who knows? Maybe in other countries in the near future. Thanks so much indeed for your time.
Muito obrigado, my brother. Asante sana.
Asante sana. Adeus. That's Advocate Sipho Mantula, who's one of our regular commentators, saying that this is a critical moment in Angola's history. How they deal with this result and the resolution of any disputes will probably guide the country in terms of what happens next.